Hi, my name's Keith Cooper from Northlight Images, and in this short video I'm going to have a look at the sort of ongoing maintenance, keeping clean that I do for the Canon PRO-200 printer. I recently looked at a similar process for the Canon PRO-300, and several people said, oh, can you do this for other printers as well? Now, much of what I'll say here is common to almost any printers, but I'm going to have a look at issues of dust buildup, the ink pads inside, and when you should clean it, when you should run cleaning cycles and wasting ink and various things like that. Also, if you don't want to use it for long, what should you do if you're not using the printer for a long while? Now, first of all, I mentioned the other day that I use this thing. This is a classic leaf blower, battery operated one. And I use this and have used one of these for years for cleaning electronic equipment. Not close up to the full power of the nozzle, but from a distance, usually outside, if I've got something that's got dust built up. It works a treat on computer power supplies and all sorts of things. You'd be a bit careful because it is quite a powerful jet of air. But no, seriously, I do use this. You could use a hairdryer if you like, or something like that, just to get some dust out. But ideally, you want to prevent dust buildup right from the start for the printer. Right, now, the basics of keeping it clean. Dust it. I keep a cover over things. If you want to keep a cover over it, a cloth will do. I've used a tea towel in the past. You can get plastic bags. In fact, if you're in a dry, warm environment or at altitude, anywhere where things are likely to dry out more, you might want to keep your printer in a plastic bag. I've heard people do things like keep some water in a bowl or something like that. Obviously, electrical equipment, you want to be a bit careful. I'm not talking about putting damp sponges inside it. I do remember somebody telling me years ago that one of my pianos I ought to keep a bowl of water inside it to keep the humidity up. We don't really have that sort of problem here in the UK. It's just generally not an issue. So keeping the printer clean, keep it dust free. That means all these bits down here, the paper bits where the paper, this goes in for however, lift that up. There's the bit slot at the back, there's the slot at the front here, and there's also the loading area here for if you want to print on CDs and DVDs. All of these bits, you just don't want dust building up in the printer, because if dust builds up in the printer, it can get onto the paper, it can mix with the ink spray, and I'll show about ink spray and some of the problems with that in a moment. But really, it's just keeping the stuff clean and keeping it in good working order. It's nothing more complex than that, and that goes for almost any printer. Now, something I spotted on these printers is that if you look at the ink pad inside, and this is the pad underneath the print area, so the print goes, you have paper come through, the print head goes across that. There is an area underneath that foam pad which will collect overspray. Now, this is a photograph I took of it, and you can see some marks on it. You've got a line that runs along it, which is where there's occasional bits of spray have come through, but there are these bands which are due to borderless printing. Borderless really if you do a lot of borderless printing, it really makes a mess inside printers, because that ink that doesn't go on the paper has to go somewhere else. Now, ideally, it should go into these pads and remain there, but it doesn't. It sprays and ink builds up. Now, this printer has probably had no more than a few hundred prints put through it, but there's quite a distinct ink build-up here. And if you look carefully, you can even see that on the white roller covers at the top, there are signs of ink. Now, I've wiped that down and that comes off. The one thing to be careful of when you're doing this cleaning in here, inside, is the roller at the back with the yellow grease on it. Do not remove that yellow grease. That's important for the friction roller that drives the paper through. There are other ways you can clean bits that build up with ink here. You can clean the rollers. You can run a piece of thick paper through with a little bit of damp window cleaning spray on, just an area of it. You run that clean straight through, you load the paper up and then just run it through, print a blank page or something like that. And that will clean these rollers. All of the bits in here will build up dust on them. The combination of dust and ink together causes the rollers to grip less, so you get feed problems. Now, you'd have to use this an awful lot, I think, before you started getting many problems in the main feed path. But here, even from a few hundred prints, I've noticed quite a bit of ink. And I thought, right, well, I'll get some tissue paper or kitchen roll. And this is, just ordinary kitchen paper. And this is from when I cleaned some of these rollers at the back. I just slightly dampened the cloth. But as I say, be careful you don't wipe that grease off there. Now, pressing the paper down onto the pad here, dabbing it down and doing it repeatedly to absorb ink from these more heavily inked areas here, produced lots. And remember, this is only from a few hundred prints. And the problem with this ink is that it is thick, gloopy and sticky. So you will get some on your hands and the like. It stays moist. It draws in the chemicals that are in the ink, absorb a bit of moisture, and they stop it drying out completely in these pads here. So just dab this on areas of the pad, move it along, and you'll clean it out. You can see other areas there which could benefit from a clean as well, but just be careful with doing it. You don't need to get it absolutely spotless, but really you're trying to prevent excess ink building up here, where it might mark the back of sheets of paper, where the print head might get some extra spray on it off the fan. You're basically trying to keep the whole thing clean. So that's dealing with that. Now, the other question I get asked a lot about these printers is, how long should I leave them switched on? What should I do? How often should I use them? Well, the Pro-200 and the Pro-300 both are very resistant to being left switched off for a while. They're better than many larger printers. Certainly a printer like this P5000 here, I use that every week. I do not want that drying out at all. That also has fans and things in it, so there is much less dust build-up inside that than you would get in this for comparable amounts of use. So I've got this one here. I'm going to leave it switched on. If I'm using it regularly, say every few days, I'll leave it switched on. If I'm not using it for a few weeks, I'll switch it off. No point in leaving. It doesn't benefit from anything. The precise cut-off point between leaving it switched on and switching it off, well, I'm afraid that's something you're going to have to experiment with. The ink carts in these are relatively small, so expect some ink to be used up in cleanings anyway when you start the printer up. If you get, here's an issue I've come across with many printers over the years. If you do a test print and just run just do a nozzle check print, and that counts as using the printer, run plain sheet of paper through it and you'll get the nozzle check on it. If you get problems with the nozzle check, you're offered the ability to clean it, run a cleaning cycle. Now the cleaning cycle uses a little bit of ink, doesn't use much. That ink goes through, once it's gone through the system, goes through into different pads. Not this strip here, goes into pads in the base of the printer. Eventually, and we're talking thousands and thousands of prints here, most people will never ever see this happen. But if you use a printer like this a lot, then yes, it will be expensive in ink, but also eventually those pads will fill up. Now, I've heard that you can reset the counter for it. You can take them out. There are all sorts of homebrew solutions to this and hacks of ways around it. But in general, the official way is it needs a service call. So it needs to be sent back. It needs to be serviced to be fixed for that. It doesn't kill the printer completely, but it certainly means you can't use it anymore if it's telling you that those pads are full. Now, that's the pads from cleanings. I mentioned about doing a cleaning. What happens if, after you've done the cleaning, it still doesn't print properly? Now, if it is completely blank, I would give one more go and then leave the printer. If I've got more, overnight I should say, if I've got just a few nozzles not printing properly, I'll likely leave it half an hour or so before running it again, because quite often those apparently blocked nozzles are not blocked at all. There's an airlock in it, a very tiny bubble somewhere, or somewhere the ink is just not flowing right. And if you just leave the printer for an hour or two, it'll settle out. You run the print again, the test print, and lo and behold, it works. If it still doesn't work then, leave it until the next day. There is nothing to be gained by doing repeated cleanings. And I know of people who've just cleaned it, it's not worked properly, so they've cleaned it again, cleaned it, then they've gone for power cleanings and everything. And all you're doing is just wasting ink and filling up the pads in the base here. Inkjet printers have a lot of different ways, which they're generally, people say, it's clogged. Sometimes, yes, you can have printers will dry out, and there's maybe not a lot you can do apart from using cleaning solutions on the pads in here, but that's a rather more advanced bit that doesn't really come under this sort of general maintenance umbrella. But yes, you can have problems with that. It can take quite a bit of cleaning. I had a printer quite a few years ago that was given to me that was completely dead. It took a week, well, over a week of cleanings every morning and then leaving the printer. And then the following morning, repeating the process. After a couple of days, I had a few nozzles appear. After a few more days, I had a few more. It took until the following week until the printer was printing absolutely perfectly. Now, given it was a printer that was given to me, I was quite prepared for it to be scrapped anyway. But I just took it as a bit of a challenge. We'll see if we can get it going. And it worked, and it carried on working. It was somebody else's printer. They had it back once I fixed it, and it carried on being working for years for general purpose printing. So there you have. Beware of too much cleaning. Keep it free of dust. Watch those pads and for ink build-up inside, particularly if you do borderless printing. A lot of borderless printing on card and things like that generates dust will cause issues. You will get a lot of ink build-up. I'm going to say that is quite a bit. That's only from a few hundred prints. So there you go. Just the basics of keeping your printer in good order. It's not difficult. It just helps keep it work a bit better. As I say, there are all kinds of other areas of it you can clean if need be, but you shouldn't have to clean them very often. This ink build-up, I noticed, this is just getting to a point where I think I don't like all this sticky ink down the bottom here. It's the spray on here and various other bits and pieces. Anyway, if you've got any questions, let me know. It's people's questions and things like this that often give me the ideas to do these short videos, and hopefully it helps somebody get a bit more use out of their printer. And right, time for a bit more cleaning. Thanks for watching. Bye.